Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, here with Rich Klein. We're going to do, this is the first time we've done a Dueling Questions episode 2.0. So I'm not sure how you're going to receive this, but Rich has enough interesting questions. I don't think he's ever going to run out of questions. And I promise you, we won't do this every week or every month. But Rich Rich is interesting for sure that I've got some questions for Rich. So the back and forth, I think, will be entertaining for Rich and me and for anybody that listens in. So if you've got questions or comments, send them in to Dr. James Beckett at gmail.com. That's DOCTORJAMES. No spaces, just write it out. And thanks, sponsors. Again, I wouldn't mind doing dueling questions with some of the sponsors. I do have some questions for some of the sponsors. And I don't mean just the card companies, Topps, Panini, and Upper Deck, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, and ComC.com. So having a lot of fun doing this. And the dueling questions format has been fun for me, and I think fun for and it was so much fun for Rich. He wants a second helping. So Rich, you know the format. You get to go first. Welcome to the show, and be kind.
I am kind, and I'm going to lead in. Many years ago, when I first started, we'd have, before the magazine, the Price Guide went to press, we'd have a weekly meeting with you about some of the last-minute decisions and some of the important cards that were coming up. And in one of those meetings, I brought up a frustration that we didn't really market to all the Phoenix dealers when Charles Barkley was on the cover in 92, 93, the year he got traded there, and they probably could have sold 5 times as many copies, 3 times as many copies. And your response was fascinating. He says, sometimes it's okay to leave money on the table. And I'm just curious, because that's something that not everybody does in this business. Everybody wants to make the last dollar for themselves. And we want to make a profit. So I'm not trying to say that, but I'm curious by in all these years later, how you did and said, okay, sometimes it's okay not to make the last dollar or, overflood the market or anything.
My first response, Rich, is what was I thinking? Where's that money now? Is it still on the table? Now, I think that what you're referring to is it's just, we were trying to have a blend on these covers, which were really were interesting to see the demand that was generated from some of these covers. But we, rather than doing it just to maximize the dollars, I think this is what we're talking about, is that trying to be fair, trying to spread it around. And Charles could have been the next month, the month after, whatever. I don't think we were running around, tyranny of the urgent, trying to. He was. So I don't know what I was thinking there, other than we may have already had something planned, and he could go in the queue. But your insights were right. I mean, talk about a hilarious guy who was probably at the peak of his playing ability and as we saw in The Last Dance, I mean, he just was. I wouldn't, he didn't back down to anybody. So he would have been a good cover.
He's still hilarious today. I did not watch it, but I heard his comments all during the golfing match on Sunday were absolutely hilarious.
Yeah. Okay, my question for you: you have a bachelor's degree from Columbia, and what is that in?
It's political science, a good useless major.
I'm not. That's not my question. Okay, my question is: if somebody told you, if ComC or somebody said, Rich, we think we'd like you to go get a master's degree or a PhD, where would you go? What field? And they're going to all expenses paid. So what would you want to study if you were going back to school and you would really enjoy that? Is there a field of study or a level of study that you would, if it was paid for, what would you want to do? Education.
I've always been a history buff, so I'd want to do something in the history, and probably American history since 1865. That's always been my most, to me, that's always been the most fascinating part. And it's just so much has happened in this country. There's so many big things. I actually did research when I was in college. And he once told me he had all his 60s and 61s baseball cards. And I used to tell him, I'll take that instead of cash for the payment. And he did something about shoemaking and printing or publishing newspapers or publishing in Philadelphia between 1850 and 1885. And I read either through microfilm or through it, and I noted all the articles, and there were some fascinating things. And every once in a while I'd stop because I'd see an article about baseball on the front page, so I'd read that while I was at it.
But your thesis, if you were doing this master's or PhD and you had to do a thesis or a dissertation, you would not do sports or cards. It would be more esoteric, more What was really going on in the culture?
Related. It might be sports related, but it wouldn't necessarily be on sports. It might be more on, politician. This is going to sound weird. Like in New Jersey, when I grew up, we had 6 straight secretaries of state go to jail for political malfeasance. So something about just what type of people have been involved in politics at a certain point in a certain geographical area would fascinate me.
Okay, well, that's the end of my question. I'm just shocked that you would not lean into your vast hobby experience. So your turn for a question.
Okay, question number 2. I was, and after your heart attack, I didn't see you as much, but I would come in sometimes if I had a question, or I'd email you a question. And a situation came up where Rob Virus, our mutual friend and one of your sponsors, I think wanted to get a little something extra for the almanac, as an ad or something. And I went to you with that. And I think your response to me was something like, Rich, in this case, a bad deal is probably better than no deal at all. And so I was curious because, to me, that showed a lot about you. Instead of trying to win on everything, hey, sometimes a short-term loss, and I think you've alluded to this in a couple of your podcasts, sometimes it's okay not to win on everything if you're going to win overall with a person. And I don't mean that you lost with Rob Virus. Rob's very smart, and the relationship that you had with him and Beckett Marketplace was very mutually beneficial. But I got a lot out of that, and I was just curious what you thought about that type of comment.
Well, I mean, I think that if you're going to bend over and give a good deal to somebody, he's a good one. He really was extremely influential in the. I don't want to talk about him in the past tense, but he's a very influential dealer. He was even then, and so in the larger scheme of things, I want to be in a business relationship with people I respect, and if it's an extra good deal for the other person, obviously you can't do an extra good deal every single time, but to occasionally give an affirmation to somebody you want to be in business with without betting the farm, that's a good thing. I just think he was. A lot of those things, Rich, from being, doing some of the same things I did, the unique contributions of some of the people in the hobby, it was hard to quantify anyway. So if he put a different value on some of his contributions than I did, then I could say, okay. So I'm losing no sleep over that at all.
One of the policies I always had was that we were making money off the almanac anyway, and publishing an extra 8 pages probably, if we had to publish an extra 8 pages to get some extra ads in, probably wasn't going to bust the budget.
It wasn't going to bust the budget. And like I said, I'm going to do an episode about our advertising policies in a few weeks, and that'll be good. But does that answer that question? You ready?
Sure does.
Okay. You are not limited to any number of people here. So you can do a whole bunch of people if you want. But the scenario is this. This is a what if. Upper Deck. Let's say it's Upper Deck, but it could be Topps, could be Panini. But let's say it's Upper Deck calls you and says, Rich, I know you know a lot of people in the industry. We need to hire some people right now for a hobby job that is good paying job, and who do you know that would be somebody that would really be good to work at Upper Deck, whether it's on location or sheltered in place, but who are some people, and it doesn't have to be full time, what's the talent out there that you've come across that you could recommend to them or tell them how to go about it? Would you push them towards some of the podcasters or some of the relationships you have? Who are some of the sharp people that I'm excluded and you're excluded. You can't say, well, you need to hire Jim or you need to hire. So present company notwithstanding, are there some sharp young people or a process you would recommend from all the contacts you have in the industry?
Well, but one of my first thoughts, because some of them are so active, there are some really, really bright podcasters out there. Mike Sumner comes to mind as somebody who's very intuitive and has really studies. Like, as you said, he's very analytical. And he'll even realize, he wrote one of his blogs about Project 2020, said he misread what Topps was doing with that and has gone into it because he realized he was wrong. And that's something that not everybody can, will say, hey, I can be wrong on something and I can make adjustments. And making products, you have to make adjustments. Big Shep in California, who you still need to interview, since you interviewed the other 2 people on the About the Cards project.
He's scheduled, Rich.
Okay, good. Is another person who's really into doing that type of work, where he's done enough in enough different fields to do it. My friend here, Ken Kinsley, would be very good because Ken is very, he's worked for major corporations. He understands how corporations work. And that's something else. You can't necessarily dump in somebody who may never have worked for a small or big corporation before, or a small or big company. because they may have, learning corporate culture can be hard, but it's even harder if you've never done anything like that. If all you ever did was work in a card store, that's kind of hard to adjust to a corporation, big or company, big or small.
Okay, let's stop at those three. But my point I was going to make is I thought you'd say something a little bit like that. But in the case of Mike Summer and Tim Shepler, you're talking about guys that are, which is wonderful, they're kind of giving it away, kind of like we are here. So Upper Deck, if it was Upper Deck, they don't need to hire Mike Summer. They get the benefit of the research and the blogging that he's doing. And same thing with Big Shep about the cards. I mean, it's amazing the information's out there. But obviously, I agree. If they wanted to hire somebody on a more substantial basis, either out there or get more hours and be in a contractual relationship, tap it into some of these podcasters and Ken as well, would be a good idea. So I guess I like your answer, and I think card companies, if you're listening, you could tap into some of the wisdom of some of the podcasters. Present company notwithstanding, again, we're giving it away for free, but some have their niches, and I hope listeners, you'll tap into it. Okay, Rich, I wanted to give you last word, so we probably got time for one last question.
Clay Larasti at Topps always used to tell me, Rich, we don't mind if you put a criticism in of some of our products or your comments when you do a box review, because we know you're doing those constructively. And that's one of the most important things for card companies to listen to. If they know that you're trying to help them, they're much more responsive to how you say something rather than they're just, they're bad people. But if they say, I think Topps did something wrong here because, just like we used to say at Beckett, if somebody came up to us and said, Beckett sucks, well, we wouldn't listen. But if somebody said, Beckett sucks because you missed this, oh, well, listen, you have a specific complaint. And that's something to remember, that you have to bring specific things to help all these card companies with too.
So what's your question? Do you want me to?
That wasn't really a question. It's just a statement.
Well, I will say this. We had, back in the day, we had lengthy discussions with all the card companies, and they did want feedback. But as I mentioned, you were on the show with me a little while ago with the Hobby Hotline, the call-in show. And one of the topics that came up was some of the ways the card companies dealt back when things were getting a little tricky for some of the companies. And they regarded us as the enemy. One of them did anyway, to some degree. And it didn't feel, your scenario of asking for constructive criticism was not the way they came at it. It was trying to tell us how to do our job, which that doesn't feel very good.
You never mind what somebody said, this is how you should do your job. And I don't think anybody likes that to this day. But, as I said, though, that they understood in more recent years, they've been more receptive to legitimate constructive, and I'll use the word legitimate constructive criticism.
There is a such thing as constructive criticism. Like I said, it's instead of doing this, could you do it this way? And sometimes there's some additional reason why you're doing it a different way than what they think that they're not aware of. And you can tell, oh, okay, so that's why you do that. You have these certain deadlines or you have something. So again, as long as it's civil and amicable and professional, you've got a real chance to increase the understanding. And everybody wants to have a profitable, enjoyable hobby. And the card companies, they're trying to make money, but the ones I know love their job too. So
Jim, you brought up and you posted some of the information we had at our hobby dinner when you take the hobby dinners with some of the things. And our mutual friends who we used to work with at Beckett posted about some of what they have to go through to get approvals from the NBA to get their cards done. And the NBA may say, no, you have to change this at the last minute. So they have to go through things we don't even think about.
Agreed. Okay. Well, that's a good, I'm not wanting to turn back the clock to those days, actually, but I'm happy with the good new days that we have. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, listeners. Be back again tomorrow with another episode.